In trademark global chamber style, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining from wherever you are and whenever you are in this very timely Globinar that we have planned for you. And it is called Internal Audit, the Business Tune-Up for Cross-Border Success. This is very timely, and we have a specialist with whom I have the privilege of working very closely together. She's like a sister to me, but beyond that, she's a very qualified auditor, innovator, writer, and more. This is Kashfia, and for those who has 17 plus years of experience in working in this industry. And in her presentation, you'll get to know more about her. So I'm excited, and I hope you're all excited as much as I am. So let's get started. I'll hand over the floor to Kashfia for those.
Thank you so much, Maimun. Thank you everyone for choosing to be here. So I am humbled, and I truly appreciate your presence here tonight, and or this morning or this evening, whatever it is for you, wherever. Just a little bit about me. Jem, can we share the screen now?
Yeah, sure. Just one moment. Okay.
Okay.
Do you see my screen now?
Yes, yes. So I just tell you when to change the slide, right?
That should work. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, next slide. Okay, we can move on to the next one. This is just for more of for later. Okay. So Maimun has already introduced me a little bit, but a little more about me, so you feel like you're in safe hands with this topic. I have 17 plus years of expertise and international experience in the internal audit, compliance, risk management, and governance functions. I started with Big Four in the US with Ernst & Young, and I later moved into internal audit because I felt like I could contribute more with my experience there. And I have built and run internal audit and risk management functions for international pharma companies like Glaxo, public health company research facilities like ICD-DRB. I was a compliance analyst for Chevron, which is a global giant in the energy sector. Next slide. I also built and led the internal audit and compliance function for Summit Group, which is a leading group of companies in the energy sector of Asia, headquartered in Singapore, and they are the largest producer in Bangladesh. And at that time, when I was leading their function, they had a valuation of $1.5 billion with a total asset valuation of $3 billion. And this is a small example of how good internal audit functions help you grow even more, and cross-border. Summit is an example, which is why I highlight these 2 points. Because of having a good, robust internal audit and governance and compliance mechanism, they were able to secure a huge IFC loan and partnership. And later on, also, they were able to sell 22% stake of their company and secure 330 mil value Asian investment from Japan's largest energy company, which is JERA. And in all of this, it was very important for the companies coming in for partnership or for investment to do their due diligence and see that there was good governance and there was a robust internal audit and compliance function before they could feel assured in investing in this company. So this is just a small example from my experience that I want to share, like from the get-go, that how it plays a role in helping you succeed, both in growing as well as securing cross-border partnerships and investments. All right, next slide. And I have consulted in various industries, in the apparel industry of Bangladesh, in the real estate and construction industry, not-for-profit industry. So 17 years, not a short time. So it gave me a chance to get a lot of varied experience that I'm grateful to have. All right, so diving into the meat of the session. All right, next slide, Jem. All right, so the textbook example, what is internal audit? It is an independent, objective assurance and consulting activity designed to improve an organization's operation. So that is the textbook definition that you will find, which is true, it is, but in essence, I want to make it as, you know, as approachable as possible, because it is a very niche subject and topic. So what internal audit really is basically that insurance that you have where you can identify your risks and take measures or put in controls in place to make sure, or at least try as much as possible, to prevent your risk from becoming a reality. And even if it does so, you can minimize the impact of it with the right kinds of controls in place. So internal audit is basically there to protect a company's assets, to protect a company's reputation, a company's management, a company's operations, and in an objective and independent manner. So it is not, serving anyone's interest or any one department or even the owner's interest. It is serving the company's interest to the best of it. So that is, in a sense, what internal audit does. And it does so by focusing on risk management, controls in place, and good governance. To share the 3 lines of defense. So if you look at it from like sort of a war or a battle, there are different lines of defense, right? So if you get through the first line of defense, there's a second line of defense. If you get through the second line of defense, there's a third line of defense. So in our profession, we like to call it a 3 lines of defense model, or 3 LOD model in short. The first line of defense is the operational management's control of the organizational risks. So this is where the owners and the business heads, operational heads, departmental heads, employees, they're the owners of the risks, and they are responsible for identifying and putting in controls to ensure that these risks don't get out of hand or don't become reality. So that's the first line of defense, where the owners themselves or the companies or the units itself have controls in place to own the risks and to take measures. Second line of defense is the risk management and compliance functions. Next slide, Jem. So these are the functions which are helping the first line of defense, which is the owners and the business unit heads, in designing the controls that will help in assisting the risk owners in targeting their risk exposures and providing the adequate mitigation plans in order to manage these risks. So risk management facilitates and monitors the implementation of these risk management practices by management so they can better mitigate the control risks that are being posed in their operations. Next slide. And the compliance function, which goes hand in hand with risk management, is there basically to ensure that you're complying with applicable laws and regulations. So the second line of defense is basically risk management and compliance hand in hand. So they're helping the management and the business unit heads in making sure that the internal controls are in place to manage the risks and compliance with applicable laws and regulations are being done. And then the third line of defense, which is where internal audit comes in. The job of third line of defense, the internal audit, is to make sure that it provides assurance on the effectiveness of the first line of defense and the second line of defense. So overall, to make sure that these 2 lines of defense are working in tandem and they're in place, and it's actually enough or adequate, is where internal audit's role comes in. And a chief difference between the first 2 lines of defense and internal audit is that those report to the management, right? So they're not independent. So they're working in sync with management. But internal audit has to be independent of management, and it has a direct reporting line to the governing body or audit committee, depending on the company structure. So this is very important because internal audit has to be objective, and for that, they need to be independent. Yes, next slide, Jen. The key functions of an internal audit are, of course, the risk assessment, where it identifies, mitigates the operational, financial, compliance risks. gives governance support, so to ensure that the company is adhering to the internal policies as well as the external regulations. Fraud prevention, detecting, preventing financial misstatements, errors, fraudulent activities, misappropriations, thefts, and process improvement, where it enhances the efficiency and effectiveness of business operations so that your business is running smoothly and effectively. Next slide, please. So here's, I'm sorry about the quality of the image. I tried my best, but this has gotten a little distorted, but I hope that you can somewhat read, but I will explain. So this is the original model of the 3 lines of defense that we were talking about. And if you can see the first and second line are reporting to the senior management. So this is an internal function, and the third line of defense, which is internal audit, is reporting separately. So in our profession, since 2020, we believe that this has become a little bit outdated. And we want to talk about the future, right? So we want to talk about the future of internal audit and how that can help future businesses or businesses to be ready for the future growth. And this is the updated model. As you can see, the difference is what? In the first model, the arrows are going only upwards, right? And in the second model, you can see the arrows are going both ways, vertically as well as horizontally, correct? And that is because the old model was where internal audit was working in a silo, and that doesn't really work. So when you're working in a silo where you want to just come in and find out the faults and you want to report, it's not very organic, neither does it add much value, is what we have seen. And most of the times, internal auditors used to be very reluctant to reach over and assist management with monitoring and oversight. If you call them or if you came to them, they would come, but they don't want to come to you and suggest changes or what can be done. Even if they know what can be done, they don't want to do that. They want to be like that scary entity that, oh my God, internal audit is here. So that has evolved, and that's what we want to highlight, that you want to be able to get comfortable sitting down with management in the boardroom and offering your audit perspective when the things are happening, not after the fact, right? While the controls are being implemented. You don't want to come in later when everything's done, oh, this is wrong, or you didn't do this right. So the new way of looking at it, which is where internal audit is evolved, is that there has to be a back and forth alignment and collaboration with management, with the other lines of defense, and with all the business units. So the more there's alignment, collaboration, and back and forth and communication, the better your internal audit will serve you. And you might ask, well, if that happens, then doesn't it affect the independence somewhat? Because, we want them to be not so involved with the operations, right? So that they can be objective and independent. Of course, independence is key, but independence does not necessarily imply isolation. You don't have to be isolated to be independent in your opinion and in your advice, or how a company should develop their controls or how they should implement measures that can help them perform better. You can be in constant communication and collaborate and still have your independent objective assurance. You don't have to be isolated for that. So this is where the traditional method has been outdated, that there was this idea that you need to be isolated and not in communication so much in order to be independent. Not so. And in fact, I believe internal audit has an obligation to collaborate with, and communicate with management, because they have you there to help them make their company better. So you are actually obligated to help them the best as you can. And for that, you need a deep understanding of the business and a deep understanding of the management's role, their responsibility. What do they want to achieve? Because if you don't know what a company wants to achieve, what their goals are, then how can you help them the best that you can with your expertise? So just to give a layman's example, say a bridge is being built, and you see that the bridge is being built with some faults and bad cement and faulty, nuts and bolts, but you're just sitting there and looking at it and not saying anything. And once it's built and it's faulty and it's not functioning, and you come in and say, oh, this was wrong and that is wrong, you don't want that. I mean, how does that even add enough value? And the core of internal audit is adding value. It's a value adding service. So you want to be able to add that value while the bridge is being built, and add in your perspective, your advice, your input, not after it has been built. So next slide, please, Jim. So the evolved role of internal audit, just to summarize, is alignment, collaboration with management, more communication, more open lines of communication, not isolation, but independence, and addition of direct value while the controls are being designed, while they're being implemented, not after the fact so much. All right, next. So we want to use internal audit as a preventive tool, right? From what we've just talked about, so that we can prevent as much as possible and not do damage control as much as we can avoid later. And as cliche as it may sound, I want to use a health analogy that prevention is better than cure. It is true, as cheesy and cliche as it may sound. So if we compare this to health checks, why do we have a balanced diet? Even if we are not sick now or we are okay, but we do have, we try to have good food, we try to get enough exercise, necessary nutrients. Why? To ensure good health and longevity, right? We want to live longer, we want to have a healthy life, we want to function better as long as possible. And not only to be well, but also sometimes a lot of the preventable diseases afterwards is not only more expensive to treat, but more you suffer a lot. And sometimes it's not even possible to treat or rectify, right? So if you look at internal audit in the same way as for a company's health, next slide, Jem, then we can see that instead of being reactive, where we address issues after they occur, if you look at from a health perspective, how we take care of our bodies, how we eat well, good. Internal audit is there same way to make sure that we have a forward-looking approach to safeguard the organization, like healthy choices safeguard our body, right? So we want to be proactive rather than reactive. And among the many things that helps with is some of the four main things are, of course, cost savings. Just like diseases, fixing problems after they happen is a lot of times more expensive than preventing them. A fraud happens, someone damages your, company software or steals something from your site. I mean, replacing that is definitely more expensive than if you would have probably had a small control in place like lock and key or security cameras. That's an example of a control. It's as simple as that. Reputation management. You want to protect your reputation for your stakeholders' trust, for your shareholders' trusts. And sometimes reputation is so hard to fix once it's damaged that, it's sometimes impossible. So by reputational damage, I mean, if there are not good HR, say, controls in place, there can be a discriminatory or a toxic culture of harassment that gets out of hand in your company, So something like that. Regulatory compliance. You want to avoid penalties and sanctions by ensuring you're adhering to the laws and standards. And for that, you need regulatory compliance, which internal audit checks is one of their main focuses. Operational efficiencies. If you have efficient processes, it will allow you to take timely corrective actions, which can, prevent future losses and disasters. Next slide. So more than anything, it's in my experience, I've seen that it also encourages a mindset of continuous improvement. I have seen before and after a company has internal audit function in place, it actually also works as a psychological tool, believe it or not. When people know there is internal audit and they will be checking, they will be doing the audit, they automatically tend to not do things that they would have otherwise. And it's just a psychological, it's a psychological effect that happens. And we are human beings, this is why, there are laws, there are things that whether you break it or not, just the fact that there is something helps deter people or from doing that. So it does encourage a mindset of continuous improvement as well as vigilance across the organization. You do think twice before you um, break that policy or be a bully to your coworker in the open. Next slide. All right. Of course, with anything else, there are challenges of internal audit as well. And one of the top three, the most common is resistance to audit findings. Some employees, leaders, they resist change, especially if there was no internal audit before and you want to come in and establish internal audit, you will face huge resistance. No one likes change. And especially when something is you feel working, I mean, why fix it if it's not broken? Because they don't have the perspective that you come in with. Most of the employees and a lot of people in management think that it's unnecessary. Why do we need to do this? So that is where a lot of your, we just spoke about how internal audit has evolved for a better alignment and communication and collaboration with management. That is where that comes in, where you need to familiarize your stakeholders before you go and launch internal audit or any of these regulatory compliance functions, so that when this comes in, it's something of a process and it's not a shock, because you want them to cooperate, because this is something that we want to achieve holistically, right, with everyone on board. So that's why it's very important for a lot of communication and alignment to overcome the resistance. Resource limitations is another big challenge where the internal audit teams may lack the bandwidth to audit every possible risk area. This is especially prevalent in technical companies or construction companies where there's a lot of specialized work. So your internal audit team may not have engineers, right? So how do you do construction audits or technical audits if you're not an engineer yourself? This is where a lot of cross-functional guest auditors can help. And in my experience, I've actually implemented this in one of my previous companies, and it has worked fantastically, where, so you have two different construction business units, and you get guest auditors to do the other one, and you cross them, and they help you. And that way they're independent. They're not auditing their own project, but they're also bringing in their expertise, technical expertise, to support the internal audit team. So this is how you also save costs, because you don't have to go and get another technical audit company or hire that company to come in and do your technical audits. You can just use your own people to support that function. So there are solutions to these challenges. And of course, like anything else, nothing is 100%. Dynamic risks, like ever-evolving cyber threats, things like that, that's always going to be there. We try our best, but they're always going to be, nothing's 100%, right? There's always going to be something that might slip out, but you try your best. And, it's always better to be prepared than, not. Next slide, please. All right, so our cross-border. So since we are, one of our chief focus points today is cross-border success, that's in the title. I would like to start off with the challenges, because that's what people really want to focus on, right? We know what it is, but what are the challenges? And of having experience in working both in Bangladesh, in the US, in Singapore, working with Europe. So from my experience of both local and cross-border auditing of businesses, I would say the four main risks or challenges that I've seen are, one is, of course, the regulatory diversity. Multiple jurisdictions come with differing laws, different compliance requirements, different, policies, different local laws, international laws. So that's one of the main areas where you will face the challenge. Cultural variances, next. A lot of business practices that are different in one country or acceptable in one country are not so in another. But it's not that nothing right or wrong, it's just how the practices are, and you have to account for that cultural difference, and also how ethics are seen in different cultures. Currency and economic risks, of course, exchange rate fluctuations you have to account for, and especially in today's volatile economy, where things are changing so fast, and there's always something happening. You have to account for this. And as global as our environment is becoming, which is amazing, but the more your data is at risk and you're facing cybersecurity threats, because most of our documents, most of our work is now digitally available, right? It's probably in a cloud, it's probably somewhere. So it's not a physical file or document anymore that you can always just keep with your safe keep, So that's why cybersecurity threats are something that we need to be aware of also in when we're designing our internal audit for cross-border businesses. Given that a lot of people here are not necessarily from the internal audit profession or background, but they're definitely from the business background. So I thought that I will use an international business terminology to better explain how internal audit can help overcome these challenges. So I'm sure most people are familiar with the centralization, formalization, socialization model. And if you're not, I will elaborate, no worries. So I think that as an auditor, I felt that this can also be it's a model that can be transferred to internal audit application, and it has worked for internal audit functions that are group functions where it's global, where the group function is centralized somewhere, but they have small functions in the other countries that the company operates in, or even if there's two different companies working together from two different jurisdictions, this model actually works. So when we say how to translate this centralization, formalization, socialization model to internal audit, centralization is basically having one central hub, right, for your internal audit policies or internal audit programs and plans. And what works is a hybrid structure most of the time, which is like a wheel, like a hub and spoke. So you have the hub in the main country of operation, and then like a wheels spokes, the other internal audit teams or functions kind of lead away from the hub, carrying the same values, but maybe in a smaller scale. And this can be used for one multinational company that have, offices in different countries, or even for two different companies for a project that they're doing from two different countries. And I would like to emphasize something that we would like, that in theory works, but in practice not so much. And that is that we want to sometimes bring in great practices, best practices, and kind of implement it in a uniform manner across all countries or jurisdictions and cultures. It doesn't always work sometimes, and not only does it not work, it backfires. So we want to put emphasis on the benefits of sometimes allowing some local autonomy in the decision-making processes. You have to respect the local jurisdiction or local culture of that company and work with it. So you have to let that happen for the betterment of the whole organization. You cannot actually bulldoze your way into cultures. And as Global Chamber, we see it all the time, how important it is to integrate to other cultures and respect that. So the same is for internal audit or any kind of compliance. You have to take that into consideration, and you have to allow that, the space for that to happen. And it's very important that the internal audit functions of both companies liaise with both their management board and other functions. So it's a lot of collaboration and communication, which will help in centralizing and having a very effective process. Next slide. So formalization, when we say formalization, we basically just mean harmonizing the methodologies across all the divisions and projects, just how we do it for companies, SOPs and policies, same with internal audit methodologies. So we want to have one, as much as possible, one, framework that can be applied as much as possible to all the, companies, units in both the jurisdictions. Of course, we have to allow for some customization for the local structures. But as much as possible, if there are common policies, procedures, or reporting standards, we want to converge and form a common internal audit framework so that we can streamline and use this as efficiently as possible for uniform internal audit procedures. So next, which is the last step, which is socialization, is where we want acceptance and implementation of the global standards, but this will be subject to effective communication of your corporate objectives, values, and behavioral patterns. And this is where we emphasized earlier on the alignment and communication. Because as good as you are with your alignment and communication and collaboration, is how well your standards that you want to implement through your internal audit functions will be accepted and implemented. And one of the things that we've seen has been very effective is if you can rotate within your internal audit departments. So if it's the same company, but with two different functions in two different countries, you can have your audit teams switch like for 3 months, so they can get familiarized with that other jurisdiction, the other local company's culture, and then switch back. So this really helps all of them work in a more organic manner and give you a more effective result. And also, like we mentioned earlier, joint audits, just how you can do where where you can switch different expertises. You can also do this for different locations where you can have joint audits, and it provides a good opportunity to share knowledge and experience as well. And also the team works better when they understand each other's localized cultures and quirks, and can apply it best to the development of the organization as a whole. Or if it's two different organizations and you're working on a project cross-border. So stemming from this, I would like to move into the next focus area, which is culture audits. This might not be very familiar to a lot of people. This is something that is actually, we have been doing it for a long time. We just never labeled it, but now it's being labeled just so to emphasize on the importance of it. And when we say culture audit, we don't just mean the local culture geographically. What we mean is an organization's workplace culture, the values, the behaviors. And it is very important before you establish an internal audit function in any organization, or if you go in and plan your audit, it's very important to do a culture audit first, especially in a company where there is no existing internal audit function. Why? When we are evaluating the existing controls that are already present, because every company more or less has something, right? It's not zero. There is some controls in place, some SOPs, some policies that they're using. It might not be up to the mark, but there's something. And there's some form of control environment. It might be weak, it might be medium, it might be great, but there is a control environment. When we say control environment, what we mean is what kind of culture of ethics and establishment of policies, controls in place are there. So that is the control environment that we need to work with, what already exists. And when we go in to assess this, we also want to see what kind of culture is in an organization's workplace, right? Because if you don't know what kind of culture is present, then how are you going to suggest the best recommendations for that company, right? To improve or to, develop. And it also helps align a company's stated values and actual practice, because more often than not, you will see a lot of things look very good on paper, and you want to be that, and you know that's what you want to portray, but in reality, in your actual practice, that is not happening. So when you do a culture audit, it can, you know, identify the gap between the stated values and the actual practice, and this gap is where you come in identifying what internal controls and what can you do to help in bridging this gap as much as possible, right? Next slide. So it's an essential part nowadays to do this culture audit during your pre-audit, which is the internal control review, where, like we said, we are evaluating the existence or the strength of the internal controls in the company that are already present to mitigate the risks. Next. Okay. What are some other reasons? So that being the chief one, the other reasons you want to conduct cultural audits is you want to assess the alignment that whatever the company is saying in their organization values are also being reflected in their operations. Because it's not enough to just say, you need to also, what is that? Walk the talk, right? So in your day-to-day operations. So you want to reflect what you're actually stating as much as possible. You want to enhance employee engagement, because nowadays, as we have seen during the great resignation after COVID, that employee morale is so important. And you want to improve that and reduce your turnover as much as possible. And for that, you have to see what are the factors that can be used to improve the morale of employees, enhance their engagement, and hence, you know, make the workplace somewhere where they're also aligned to the company's goals and they want to achieve the goals with the company, not just work for the company, or not because they just have to, but where they feel like they also want to achieve the company's goals. Of course, it strengthens reputation. You know, you want to build trust among your stakeholders, and one of the main ways is by fostering ethical behavior, tone at top, like we say. More you, develop the culture of ethical behavior, the more it will be reflected in your day-to-day meetings, etc., with your stakeholders. And of course, like we mentioned before, you want to mitigate risks before it becomes something that's out of hand. You know, you don't want toxic culture, harassment. So that is something that you want to identify way before, and you want to advise accordingly, whether that is present or not in a company. Next slide, please. Key elements of a culture audit, of course, like we said, leadership behavior. Are leaders modeling the desired culture? This is so important. I know we say it, but this actually, you know, when leaders model the culture they want to be seen, this actually is much better than just when they say or they tell their employees, please do this way. If they can model the behavior they want to see, you know, more often than not, the employees will start reflecting the same. So it's important to, you know, assess the leadership behavior when we are going in for a cultural audit. Employee feedbacks. This is a very useful tool. I myself have benefited a lot from this when designing or when giving an assessment of the current culture or internal controls that are present. Surveys, interviews, talk to them. They are the best ways to find out how a company is, you know, company culture is being portrayed. What are the existing policies and practices? Diversity, equity, inclusion. We want to see what are the efforts that are already there to promote this, and how effectively does information flow across an organization. And when we're talking about communication, it's important because we're talking about cross-border. When you're looking at, say, a company in Bangladesh as opposed to a company in the US, a lot of times when I've been doing surveys in Bangladesh for their internal audit culture, you know, employees don't want to talk about the negative parts of a lot of times their supervisors or the culture, and not because they find it borderline complaining, even if it's something that's very not personal, very like information based, but they don't want to say it. It's just a cultural thing. They find that it could be offensive, or it could be they get a little scared, or they find it complaining, and they don't want to come, you know, state the negative so openly, as opposed to I've seen in a US company They do it a very matter-of-factly. They don't want to complain either or offend anyone, but they do it very matter-of-factly, as in, oh, if I say this, it's going to help improve the culture. That's because of the culture, right? They're very frank. So it's just a different way of sharing and speaking style. So you want to know, that's why it's important to understand the culture, is because you want to know how best you can get information out of the employees. So in different cultures, that's why it's very important to ask the right questions, because you'll only get the most effective answers if you know what questions to ask in the first place. It's very important to ask the right questions, and it has to be different for different organizations, for different cultures, as you know, just like the example I just shared. It's just a different way of thinking. No right, wrong, or anything. It's just how you know, people are in different cultures. And also, when you want to do this control environment assessment, this is just some details on what COSO is, because it's based on that. Is for reference later. If you can go to the next slide, Jen. So control environment assessment that we were talking about is basically how the leadership is in an organization, right? And the key elements that determine how you're going to check for this is, of course, the integrity and ethical values they have, they have in their mission and vision, and how they're portraying that. The importance of the board, how important is the board that they have? Are they independent? Is there some expertise? People with some expertise on the board, with some financial expertise, who can analyze audit reports. What is the management's philosophy and operating style? How is the organization structured? What are the reporting lines? How easy it is for the employees to report about something that could be troubling, that they need to report? How safe do they feel doing that? Next. What is the commitment to competence of the leadership? Very important. Do they want to change, or do they want to improve? Really, how do they value competent people? How do they value competence? How are the authorities and responsibilities established in a company? What are the, financial delegation done? Who can sign for what? How are the responsibilities divided? Are there enough segregation between within units or business units or departments to ensure there's check and balance? And human resources, how strong is your HR department? These are so important. And you want to be, when you go and doing this cultural audit and assessing this control environment, you want to be the missing bridge between management and employees, right? You want to be that function or that service that helps bridge this gap, so this all can come into sync and work in an organic manner in improving the company's governance control environment, and making it more risk averse, and more and just giving it a stronger framework to function as best as it can. So you want to be that service that is the missing bridge between the management employees. But here is my 2 cents on this, that you also don't want to be totally you don't want to totally get into the employees, because employees will complain about a lot of things. So you want to make sure that you're objective and also assessing what they're saying. Of course, you want them to speak to you, want them to share, but you have to also keep in mind that you are also there for the leadership. They have given you this job to make sure that, because they want to improve. So one of your chief responsibilities is also to assure leadership that the initiatives that they are taking are aligned with the organizational goals, right? So you want to bridge it, but you don't want to be biased to any one side, right? It's like, because no one wants to hear, the leadership doesn't want to constant hear that, as true as it may be, oh, this is wrong, that is wrong, you need to fix this. You need to also understand what their organization goals are. It's like a psychologist, when a patient comes to them, if from the get-go you listen to the patient, and the psychologist tells the patient, oh, this is wrong, you're doing this wrong, oh, you shouldn't have done this, you need to do this, do you think the patient's going to come back, or it's going to be any good? No, I don't think so, right? So it's like that. You have to listen, you have to process, and you have to give your input in a way that bridges the gap and helps both the culture for the employees and as well as the leadership, so that they can also understand what they're doing if that is not, syncing with the workplace culture, and how best they can fix it instead of just, blaming them for not doing a good job. Next. So and this is my last section. We started a little bit late, so I think I'll take 5 minutes extra from the 45. So I think we've talked about the culture, how culture audits add value already. I think we've gone through this. So let's move on to the next slides, Jen. I think we've covered this already, and I'll share the presentation for if anyone wants later reference. Okay, the one before, yeah. So one of the main things that I've heard almost always in my 17 plus years is that, especially from small and medium sized business enterprises, SMEs, is that I don't have enough money to invest in an internal audit, right? Or I don't want to have a full-time internal audit. I'm a small or medium business. I don't need it, but I do need some good governance or some internal controls in place. I do need some kind of risk management. What do I do? And Jem, the next, you can go through the next few slides actually. To slide number 19. The one before this, the one before this, the one before this, before. One more. Yeah. The one after. The one after this. Yeah. After.
I'm sorry.
The outsourcing, the first slide of outsourcing. After this. Yeah. Yeah. This one. So what do we advise for companies small and or medium sized where they want all the good stuff of internal audit, having internal audit, but they don't want to spend or they are unable to spend on this as much as they would like to? Outsourcing is a great option. It's a great strategic choice for budget constrained companies, and it provides access to expertise and tools without the cost of having a full-time internal audit department. Because you want to get the best of it, but you don't want to pay for an arm and leg in doing it. Next slide. So what are the benefits of outsourcing, if I can quickly go through it? Of course, cost efficiency. You have a very flexible cost structure. You pay for services only when needed. You don't have to have the overhead of permanent staff if you don't need that. It reduces your training costs because you are already going to trained, qualified consultants or firms who have trained auditors. You don't need to invest in any specialized training or certification for in-house auditors. You have access to advanced tools. You don't need to invest in expensive software technology because the firms that you will be going to or the consultants will already have their own tools and methodologies. Next slide. You have access to expertise because these consultants will come with a lot of experience and expertise when they have firms providing services like this, and they will have industry specific expertise because they would have had a lot of diverse clients across industries. So that is something that you can really benefit from. So the diverse knowledge that they bring. Next. Scalability. This is something that's very popular for these businesses that when we've gone, they come to us with this, that they love that, you can scale according to their needs because this is not one size fits all, and not all audit programs or plans or is suitable for every business. Some are, it's not applicable. A lot of things are not applicable to small or medium businesses. So they love it when you can scale it up or down depending to their requirements, and they pay accordingly. It can be project based. So if you don't want, for example, you have a very a valuable project and only want auditing for that project, but not for your whole company at that time. You can do that without the long-term commitments. So that is an option. And this allows management to really focus on their business growth, which is what they want to do. And you leave the auditing to the experts and not worry about it. Next. And of course, okay, this is something that I really want to emphasize on because this is what I've seen in practicality. Internal audit, one of the main things is we said what? Independence, right? That you have to be objective and you will be independent from all other functions from management and report to the governing body. But here's something, 100% independence for internal audit in an in-house internal audit, it is a myth. Trust me, it does not happen. And less or more, wherever your company is, the US, Asia, Europe, Bangladesh, doesn't matter. You will never be 100% independent or can be objective when you're in-house internal audit function, because at the end of the day, you work for the company. And there will be some level of intervention from the management, whether it's direct, whether it's indirect. Again, that's a cultural difference how they do it, but they will do it. And so that is always going to be there where you cannot be 100% independent and objective. Maybe 85 is what I would say, but never 100%. But so this is another benefit that outsourcing brings in because they have nothing to lose. They have no fear of retaliation. They don't work for the company. Remember, they're external experts. So if you want improved independence and objectivity, this is also a good route to go. They can give you unbiased, assessments that's free from any influence or any fear, and it also enhances credibility with investors and stakeholders. Next. We've already gone through the risk mitigation and access to advanced technology. So those are the things you get when you go to experts in the field. Next. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm sorry if I didn't mean to overwhelm you guys. It's a lot of information to fit in, but I really hope today's session helped shed some light on why internal audit is important and how it can help your company and how it's an ally, it's a tool. It is not it's not policing. It is there to help you be better and to achieve the company goals and to grow, whether it's in your locality, in your local jurisdiction, in your country, or if it's cross-border. It can be a really useful tool. And I want to put in the age-old proverb that sometimes is penny wise, pound foolish when people don't invest in internal audit, because I've seen it so much in my career where people have come to me later and said, I wish I had implemented internal audit before this loss happened, before this fraud happened. I didn't do it. I should have done it. So much that it's not even funny. So it is something that I recommend for your businesses. And if there is any way I can help you in this with my services, with my advisory and assurance services to help your internal audit function grow, my details are here. That's my email, my WhatsApp and phone, and my LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out, and I would love to connect with any and all of you and help you in any way that I can from my place. So thank you so much for choosing to be here and listening. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Ms. Kashfia. That was amazing. I mean, I learned a lot. I think so. I just want to ask, do we have a few minutes for questions? Can we go a little bit over today? Jem, are we available to go over?
Yeah, I think it's fine since we don't have event next for this one. Oh, sorry, I think we have a scheduled meeting like 7 a.m. Sorry. I think
Okay.
It's
we
okay.
have 3 minutes.
All good. I think I'll just ask one or two questions that have just come in the chat. One of them was from Bill Fosh. So he asks, do we ever look at customer perspective on the audit company like Net Promoter Score?
Let me look at the chat. Hold on.
Do we use NPS to see from the customer perspective
Someone
whenever?
audited. I'm not familiar with the Net Promoter Score. I'm sorry. I'll have to look into that if there is something else that does a similar thing, but it's not the Net Promoter Score.
Great, fantastic.
Can we?
Uh,
Yeah, I will definitely look at all the questions and get back for sure.
Sure. I think one general question that anyone in this room would have, you've already mentioned it, but are your internal audits applicable to any business in any country?
Yes. Yes. So with internal audit, whether it's a small, medium, big company, or wherever it's located, the principles are pretty much the same. And every company has the similar risks. You know, it can be bigger in scope or risk rating, but less or more, the processes are very similar wherever in every company, and therefore every company in every geographic location does benefit from internal audit. Hence, it is a global function and it is applicable. Yes.
Fantastic.
Are you sorry? Is this question for my internal audit or is it in general for any internal audit? Because then I see the follow-up question, do you tend to work primarily remote or primarily on site?
I believe it was for both. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's definitely a hybrid function and a hybrid activity, internal audit, because there are many activities that has to be on site. Like, for example, if you want a site audit, a factory audit, a warehouse audit, where you are a company that has a lot of products, goods, you want those to, there's a whole inventory audit plan that goes into that and program, which I can share later if you wish. And yeah, so it is this is a mix, and it really depends on the client and on the company on what kind of audit program will be most beneficial for that company. What kind of
Fantastic.
mix.
A lot of learnings today. I'm sure we'll be sharing the presentation as well. Ms. Kashfia is a leader in her field. She's an expert.
Yes.
Please feel
Thank
free to
you.
reach out to her and
Yes, please do.
get these internal audit journeys on the way. So everyone have a great day, be global and unstoppable. And this is me, Maimun Mustafa, Executive Director, Global Chamber Dhaka, signing out. Take care now.
Thank you so much.